Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, sometimes things just sneak up on you, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean that you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals. We pick their brain about current projects through the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And, you know, if you like how we do things around here, I will assume that you do, because let's face it, we're listening right now. And if you are, please keep listening and subscribe. Subscribe to this audio-only experience and give us, the little 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. Plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we'd really appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, Letterboxd, the TikTok, the Blue Sky, the Threads, probably too many, and In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the movie image at large, because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it all that much more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please do settle with kindness. Come on by and pay us a visit. At the end of the day, nice guys compose nice things. I know that sounds a little simplistic, but, well, gosh golly gee, in the world of Ted Lasso and Shrinking and all these other fantastic shows, it's kind of true. But on this episode, we have the unique pleasure of sitting down with the composer of the man who did Ted Lasso. He did Shrinking. He's done a bunch of other stuff. He's a nice guy. We got to talk to one like Tom Howe about the art of composing and doing music for TV and just all the work he's been doing. And working with people like Bill Lawrence and Sudeikis and Brett Goldstein and really crafting these emotionally relevant but fun pieces of music that go perfectly with the shows that these people are creating. He provided a lot of insight, and it was a good talk. I almost forgot this happened. This happened a little while ago. We're a little late on publishing this one, I'll admit, but it was a darn good talk. And like I said, Shrinking is available. It's on Apple TV Plus. If you haven't already signed up for Apple Plus, what are you waiting for? It's full of fantastic shows, so go do it. But first, enjoy our talk with Tom Howe and his work on Shrinking, which is undoubtedly up for some primetime Emmys, if not this year or years to come or all that other fun stuff. But yeah, it's got to be done. So go watch the show, and we'll talk to you soon. Tom, obviously, first off, man, I just want to say thanks for the time, and I mean, congrats on Shrinking. I appreciate some time to talk about the show and get some insight on it.
Well, thank you for making the time too. Good to be here.
Well, I guess my first question is, and I mean, this might be a loaded question, but bear with me because I'm kind of curious about something. Obviously, you've got an extensive history with Bill, and that's how you got on the show. But I mean, in doing my research, I noticed you also wrote the theme song for the opening credits.
Yes.
And I'm kind
Yeah.
of curious, when you're involved sort of in something that sets the tone, because obviously the opening theme to every TV show kind of sets the tone of sort of the series and the show. Does that kind of give you a roadmap, or does it kind of limit you in terms of what you're able to do? Like, I can't imagine season 4, there's going to be sort of this Vangelis soundscape and Shrinking kind of thing.
No, I mean, I suppose I tried to not write the theme tune first, for the reason you just, partly to find the sound of the show before I commit to what I want the actual, main theme to be and the sound of it.
Right.
The only exception to that ever was Ted Lasso, where the theme came first. But that was partly, well, it was mainly due down to the fact that we hadn't got a picture or any scripts, and Marcus and I ended up getting together and we were looking for something to do, and we were like, well, why don't we write the main theme? And Jason had given a vague brief, but on Shrinking, the main title, which was with Ben from Death Cab, who's a fantastic guy, that didn't really come about until about halfway through the season. So by that point, I mean, I spent the nice thing about being on these shows with Bill and team is that that people like Kip Kroger who work across these things is that I know them very well and they get me involved very early because on other things sometimes you get hired last minute or they when they get to music they then go out to composers and you get your chance, but on this I obviously know that I'm going to do it a long way in advance. And so I messed around for months trying out different ideas for what the sonic palette of this show should be. And so when I then got to around episode 6 I was like, okay, I think this is the palette. And then I wrote 3 ideas which I sent to Ben, and sort of said, well, what do you think of these? I mean, you never know whether they're going to be any good and whether he's going to think any of them are any good. But he goes, well, this one can work if we do X, Y, and Z. And then we started collaborating back and forth. And that's how it happened on that one.
Well, I love that. And I mean, because again, Bill obviously has this reputation for making, nice stuff, stuff that makes people feel good. And obviously,
Yeah.
you're going to have an understanding of tone and sort of, the stuff that they want. I mean, how big is that for you to sort of understand the mindset of the showrunner and the people in charge? Because I mean, like I was kind of saying before, like Bill's not going to come to you with a season 4 that's in sort of this dystopian sci-fi landscape. You know what I mean? It's going to be kind of what
Yeah.
they do.
Well, I think, and that's also the night. I mean, Bill's shows. I mean, even a show I did before Ted called Whiskey Cavalier. I think it might have actually been 2 before. I think I did another one in between. That was obviously, even though that was more of an action thing, it's still an action comedy, and there's
Yeah,
moments of great heart within it. And I think Bill, his writing is and the way he tells stories is very much about bringing out the best in people and seeing the best in people, and actually that's a nice thing to work on. I mean, when you're not, I've worked on a couple of things that have been very dark, and sometimes it can put you in a bit, a bit of a dark mood when you come out the studio. But the nice thing about Bill's stuff is it's real people and real stories,
yeah.
and I sort of gravitate towards that anyway, from a kind of the kind of thing I want to sort of watch and listen to. I mean, I'd never put on a kind of, not, by the way, not that, but I'd never kind of put on a thriller score in the background just to kind of in the car driving or kind
Right,
of
right, right, right.
I just wouldn't do it. As with I would put on something that kind of made me kind of feel good and kind of brighten my mood, and all Bill's stuff sort of does that. And I think having those same people as a constant is just a really good kind of anchoring point when you start these things, to kind of also be brave to try new stuff. I mean, on this show at the start, I was, when I was messing around with the palette and I'm talking back and forth, I was like, I think I'm going to use organ. And now obviously that's a bit of an integral part of the show. And I also used a lot of staccato vocals, particularly in season 1. And you know they're like, great, let's try it. But because you know people well and you've got time, by the way, those are 2 important things. You can go off down a path, make a mistake, and come back and try something else. Is with when you come in right at the end, you've got to go down a road, and often you just got to go down the road and commit to it. You haven't got time to come back and then try something else.
And I mean, I guess that begs my next question. Like, how often, or I mean, what's the balance of, how when you get brought in early versus when you get brought in late? Because I mean, like you said, on this, you're in early, you've got chances to experiment and collaborate. But I can imagine there's going to be other jobs where it's like, okay, picture's locked. I need something. You've got 6 weeks.
Sure. Yeah, and there's always that balance. I mean, more time I think is always better, because you do get to explore things. But having said that, there are times you know when you have your back against the wall and you got to do something. I mean, even in the case of this, even though I had a long time to sort of explore sounds and do stuff, you really don't have to commit until suddenly someone says we're doing a mix next week, and at that point you have to really get on with it, otherwise you're not going to deliver anything. And I think a lot of composers, certainly that I've spoken to, friends, the deadline is your friend, really. I mean, it's terrifying, but if I didn't have a deadline I'd never get anything done. I mean, you know
You're in my business. Same in my business. I get it. Yeah.
so yeah, you need that sort of pressure, I think, to kind of commit and actually get something finished.
What is it about the job of composing for film and TV that allows a certain degree of freedom? Because I mean, I was doing some research, and I mean, going through your stuff, and I mean, I love your work on Polite Society. I mean, you've done some interesting stuff, but definitely some varying stuff. Like, what
Yeah.
is it about the job that allows sort of the freedom to mix it up? Because I mean, if you were sort of in a band or on tour, you would be playing sort of the stuff that is synonymous with the band or the records that you put out. But when you're a composer, you've got freedom to kind of mix it up.
Well, I think that's right. And to me, that's what I love. I mean, I love telling stories, and every job is all about that, regardless of whatever, whether it's dark, light, different instrumentation. It's always about getting the heart right and the story right. But you do have, by working with across like Polite Society being a good example, when you work with different directors and different stories, and the music is there to support the overall, right? If you want to make a standalone statement, you're going to make a record, and so the music has to support the story and the picture. And so by working with different directors and also across different genres, whether that's a thriller or an animation or a shrinking or a ted, you have to kind of honor what that overall story and vision is. And for me, that feels like a huge amount of freedom, really, in terms of them being able to say, okay, do you know what, that story is kind of in this direction, and I'm gonna therefore, you know, I'm going to do a complete mashup of kind of like Henry Mancini meets kazoos, and I'll just see how that feels, and then I do it. And sometimes people don't like it, and sometimes they do. So, but that's the experimenting and trying to come up with a sound for each film or each TV show. That's kind of like um, that's where all the work is, because in truth, when you get a series like Shrinking that's recurring, or even a Ted Lasso. I mean, I remember somebody asking me, saying, "Oh, Ted Lasso season 3, the episodes were long towards the end. I think the last episode might have been close to 80 minutes, which really is like a film."
Yeah.
And saying that must have been really hard to compose the music because you don't get any more time. And I was like, well, weirdly, even though it's about 4 times as much music as episode 1 in season 1, it's much easier because I've got every theme I need. I know what the sound's going to be when
Yeah.
Roy comes on. I know what the sound's going to be for Ted. And so it kind of gets less and less terrifying and easier. But the hardest bit is always coming up with what's the tune, what's the palette going to be, and justifying that, I think. And that's also the exciting bit, which makes each project different, varied, and makes the job fun.
Now I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned sort of Oregon from Shrinking, which I did
Yeah.
pick up on, but at the same time, I'm kind of curious how much kind of creative rope you have because I mean, it's not going to be one of those things like if you say I'm going to use organ on this, and then someone's going to go, well, it's got to be a Rhodes organ, or if you're going to have a guitar piece, you got to play that on a Stratocaster, or it's not going to work. But like, where does sort of the creative like push and pull come in terms of, I guess, instrumentation is probably the best way to put it.
Well, I'll suggest things and do demos, and people will either have a good reaction to it
Right.
or a
Okay.
bad one. I mean, really, it's as simple as that. I mean, on Shrinking, as I said, I did an awful lot of stuff early on, and some of it landed, and some of it didn't. And but I tried all kinds of things. I mean, there's a sound that appears throughout, but it gets more sparing as we've gone through the seasons, which is actually a marimba that I put through a kind of crystallizer and a delay and a whole. There's a cue called Psychological Vigilante on the season 1 soundtrack, and it's in the beginning of that, and it sounds like a kind of weird, almost alien sound, but it's actually a marimba that I spent. I mean, I spent just a long time trying out things, and some of them survived and some of them didn't. But whether the guitar is a Strat or a Gibson or whatever, I don't. That detail is not. No one's going to notice that
Right.
kind
Right.
of thing.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? But having said that, initially I was leaning more into a sort of 60s Beach Boys palette for
Yeah.
Shrinking, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
still that's where the organs sort of came from, and that sound, you know, Strat feels. I mean, the guitar in Shrinking is a Strat, and that feels quite good for that sound from that era. It's got a kind of a tone to it that feels right for the show, I think. So the electrics are all Strat, and then acoustics which feature more as the show's gone on. That's just a Martin guitar, but I just like the sound of it. It feels nice and earthy and good.
No, I mean, I'm curious because obviously you're in your lab right now.
Yeah.
Like when you're between shows, do you have to sort of keep tinkering and keep trying the stuff and sort of like put it in the bank and be like, okay, I like how this sounds, but let's put it away for a while, then I can come back to it later. And like, is there downtime or do you always have to sort of be constantly thinking about sounds and music and stuff that you can apply either in the moment or later on down the road.
I mean, I don't know what. Actually, I'd be really interested to know what everyone else thinks. But for me, I can't put it down. It's a sort of, which I'm not sure that's a healthy thing, by the way. But
Right.
I'm always doing something. If I'm not scoring a show, I'll have somebody around to write a song for a record, or I'll just write something for myself. Or my phone is full of I've got about 1,000 voice notes of potential themes for something that might come down, and I'll then you know just sometimes first reactions are the good and are good, and when I get a no, I've got to do something, like I've got a couple of things coming up this year and next, and I will hum a theme into my phone, and then I'll maybe revisit it, or I might even wake up in the night and have to hum something into the phone. But for me, I'm not good at not doing it, and I also have a fear. I find I don't often take a holiday, but when I do take a break, if I take a week off, when I come back, I find it really hard to start. And so I just have this fear that I should never stop, which is
Right,
obviously
right.
totally
No,
unhelpful.
I get that. I completely understand that.
So I just keep going, which I'm not sure. Yeah, so I'm here a lot, and I spend a lot of time just trying things out. And what would that sound like of this, or buying a new guitar pedal and just exploring what that can do. And I might spend a whole day and night just on a guitar pedal, and then decide I don't like it. But I might find one thing about it that's really cool, and then I'll use it down the line.
Well, and I mean, it does feel like there's a certain degree of artistic freedom when you get to compose for film and TV because on one end, I mean, and we've seen this obviously with more and more, say people who've, been on radio and released records, sort of exploring space and going to the world for obviously the reasons of, well, hey, it's a paycheck and I can help it, it'll help pay my bills and all that fun stuff. But it doesn't, it also feels like there is this sort of extra creative avenue to not be locked into sort of a musical genre and be able to sort of do what you want when you want instead of sort of having to sort of meet the expectations of the next album, the next tour, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I think somebody once, I can't remember who it is, but I was talking to, but said, film composers can be chameleons, and artists can't really do that to the same degree. I mean, there are exceptions to that, like a David Bowie. He can go
Of
and
course,
do
yeah.
Let's Dance and Tin Man and Ziggy Stardust, and they all sound pretty different. But by and large, bands and artists tend to have a sound, and they do that thing, and that's what people want to hear. And when they depart, sometimes the audience isn't too kind to them, as in the case of Tin Man. There's an
Yeah, oh
example.
no, yeah.
But but I think that a film composer can be a comedian and jump around, and even somebody who's known for a certain thing, like a John Williams, can do a sort of Schindler's List, and then he can do a Minority Report, and they're two very sort of different sounding scores, but there's still something about them that sounds like him. And I think that's the real trick, is to be a chameleon, but hopefully have something that stays consistent between different palettes and sounds.
Was there a moment for you kind of growing up getting into this business where the light bulb went off and you kind of understood that film composing didn't have to be John Williams in the pit? It could be more
Yeah.
than sort of the traditional view of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I loved Ennio Morricone, as in
Yeah,
terms of the way he could jump around and do. I mean, his scores sound very, very different, across around. He had a whole experimental period where he just had a band in a room, and they'd
that's
sort of just
true. Yeah, yeah.
play stuff in real time live to picture, and that would be a score. He was a real um, experimental kind of creative person, and I think. Um, the first time I saw a film that I really remember that had, I mean, the first Superman movie, which is obviously a John Williams score, that to me moved around for a John Williams score. It started obviously up in space, and it actually
Yeah,
had
yeah.
some sort of synths and sci-fi thing, and it had a very kind of big brass sound for kind of, and then it moved to very much Americana when he was in Smallville, and then it moved again when he went to Metropolis, and you had the fanfare. um, that had a big impact on me. Another movie which is much lesser known, which I absolutely love, was a movie. I think it was in '83 or '4. It was called Cry Freedom. It's Denzel Washington,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kevin Kline, and that also had a fusion of obviously African music in it, and that was the first time I really noticed that. And it just so happens around the same time that kind of, or maybe a bit later than that, um,
I
Paul
think it was
Simon did
86,
Grace.
87, but no, you're absolutely
Was
right.
it?
Yeah.
So yeah, well, so that then ties up with this. So it was around the same time I saw Paul Simon live doing Graceland, and that movie, again, that album had that kind of fusion, and I remember thinking, oh, this is interesting. You can have the score in this movie. There were bits where I didn't know whether it was score or whether it was, kind of traditional kind of music, and I thought, well, this is, and it really told a story, and it moved through. It started very much in an African way, and then towards the end of the movie, it's going much more into sort of piano traditional orchestration, and then it kind of reverts back as the characters, trying to flee South Africa, the Kevin Kline character. But
Yeah.
that had an impact on me, and I remember thinking, oh, it doesn't always have to be, orchestra, and then obviously there were scores where bands did things that I was kind of interested in, and all of it kind of had a an influence and a kind of impact. But I just remember thinking I wanted to be an actor when I was much smaller, and I remember thinking, this is, doing composing is like you're still telling stories, still the same kind of, just
100%.
being,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, Tom, man, just thanks for the time. And I mean, Bill's stuff is always so driven by music. And I mean, you're really a big part of that. And you're a big part of why Shrinking is probably so beloved. And I mean, I love the show and I love your work on it. But I mean, again, thanks for the insight and thanks for the time today, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Dave.
You're very welcome. All right. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.